Dan, you've been involved in the drafting of the privacy bill by Obama. Tell us a bit about that bill and the work that went into it and kind of considerations that you have in the context of the world we're in now.
Sure. I was in the White House as Deputy Chief Technology Officer for Internet Policy, and one of the key priorities we had was to establish an up-to-date and innovative privacy protection regime so that all of the extraordinary new technologies that we see developing around the world, all the new services, and a lot of the research that's so important in areas like health could proceed in a way that we could learn and grow as an economy, but also assure people that their core privacy rights were protected.
I see a lot of contradictions in America's relationship with privacy. On one hand, you've got the dot-com giants in Silicon Valley creating these entities that gather up so much information. You've got kind of forward-thinking bills like you just mentioned there, but also you have news about what the NSA are doing, and outside of America, that's considered kind of quite scary for a lot of people. Would you see that like that it's a very contradictory or a complicated relationship at the moment?
You know, I think that the whole world is in a complicated relationship with privacy questions. It's true that some of these technologies originate in America, but the usage rates for things like Facebook and YouTube and Twitter are just as high in Europe as they are in the US, in some cases higher. So everyone is using these services. People get value from these services. We see all kinds of economic benefits from these services. But at the same time, it is exactly as you say, people are worried about what privacy will mean to them in this new environment. What we really wanted to make sure of was that we didn't create a bad situation in which you don't want to tell people, well, if you've put your information out there for one purpose, then it's fair game for anything. We want people to feel comfortable using these services, but know that the information won't be abused. On the surveillance side, I think that in fairness to the law enforcement agencies, you know, our personal lives are more and more moving online. So it's not surprising that their investigative activities would move online with us. That's where we interact. So when police are investigating a crime or when the intelligence agencies are trying to detect terrorism, they're going to go where the action is. What I think we haven't yet worked out is a clear set of legal rules that allows police and security services to protect us in a way that's proportionate and managed, and that we make sure that we don't have abuses in that environment.
I spoke to Ben Weitzner, who's the lawyer for Ed Snowden, and his view is that currently the data gathering by law enforcement agencies is excessive and actually not leading to much good in terms of actual capturing or defending a nation. Would you agree with that, or do you think that one day we will have harmony when it comes to law enforcement marching in step with technology?
Well, I think that, again, what's important is, first of all, that the collection of data is happening by the private companies, not by the state agencies. So the data has been collected. The question is that Ben raises is, are the intelligence agencies making effective use of this data or not? I guess what I would say is I think in the first instance that's kind of up to them how to do their job. What I want to be assured of as a citizen is that once they have data about me, they're not misusing it. That if somehow my name shows up incidentally in some terrorism investigation, I want to make sure that that's not then passed along because maybe it shows that I was also speeding at the same time and therefore get a ticket. That's the kind of, I think, unfairness that we have to make sure that citizens can be protected from. I want to give law enforcement agencies a fair amount of latitude in exploring how they can use these new technologies to detect crime and to stop crime, but they've got to do it within the bounds of law. The key problem, I think, that Snowden revealed was that we didn't have clear rules in place, and most importantly, we didn't have a way to make sure we could tell whether these agencies that have our data are using it in a way that's fair. We had no accountability mechanisms in place that the public could really feel confident about.
In terms of your feelings as a technologist in the times we're in, I mean, we talked there about drones, for example, and again, basically people throwing up vast amounts of information about themselves online. What are your feelings on the time we are in right now? All the stuff that's happening with technology, but then ultimately, do you ever think we will reach a point of harmony where, you know, the stuff which is ultimately meant to be helping us will actually help us?
I think that what I'm most interested in as a technologist is how to take some of the incredible analytic tools that we have that allow us to learn things about people, predict people's preferences, et cetera, and take some of those technical approaches and actually apply them to privacy protection. I want to be able to watch the watchers. I want to be able to analyze what law enforcement is doing and make sure they're sticking within the rules. My research at MIT is largely about developing what we call accountable systems. So we want to make sure, in the same way as if you give your money to a bank, at some point you can look at the bank's financial statement and say, well, is my money still there? Have they handled it properly? Have they paid me the right interest, et cetera? I want to be able to do the same thing with data. We depend so much on data in so many different systems in the world. The reality is there's very little public accountability or even internal accountability about whether that data is used correctly. Your viewers may have seen Uber got into some trouble recently for their so-called God view of data. Their chief marketing officer said, oh, I know where all reporters are and I can't even tell whether they spent a night in some place maybe they shouldn't have spent the night. That speaks to the potential for enormous misuse of data. When I take an Uber, which I like, I'm not doing it for the purpose of helping them to figure out whether I'm sleeping with the right person at night. I just want to get from point A to point B. And I want to know that they're handling my data in a respectful way that follows rules that say, yeah, they can use it to get the car to me. They can even use it to figure out whether they want to sell me another kind of a service. I'm happy with that. But I don't want to use it to make inferences about my personal life. Right now, we have such a huge volume and scale of analytic capacity. We want to be able to develop systems, what we call accountable systems, to be able to apply some of that analysis to how data is used and therefore build trust for users to make sure that they're confident about how these services are working.
And a final question, Dan, on just returning to the data bill that you helped draft. Would you be confident that you'd be proven in time that this was seen as far-sighted and open-ended enough to take into account of future technology developments?
What we did was to apply long-standing privacy principles, such as the idea that individuals should be able to control information, that information collected for one purpose shouldn't be used for a completely different purpose, that data should be accurate. We looked at how to apply those principles to new technologies. So I'm confident that those are still the right principles. We need an evolving way to apply those principles to new technologies. That's why we encouraged, even in advance of our Congress acting, which sometimes takes a little while, we encouraged companies to start implementing those principles right away. And in fact, to get together with our privacy regulators and consumer advocates and talk about the kind of rules they would put in place and make sure that they have good practices even before our Congress acts. We have such again, a rapid and wonderful pace of new technology innovation. What we felt we needed was a set of broad principles that could guide the way new technology companies would implement privacy rights, and so that they would know as they develop new services what questions they ought to be asking, what basic rights they should respect. But we wanted to leave them a fair amount of flexibility in how those are implemented. So yeah, I'm confident that we have the right broad principles. The question now is, will the technology companies step up and act? Will our Congress step up and act, which we have a little bit of problem with in the U.S.? Europe has the same sort of challenge. Has been working on passing a new privacy protection law. So that's all important to do. The legislative activity matters a lot. But I think there's also a huge space for companies and industries to step up and really show leadership to assure their users that they're doing the right thing.